Hey guys, it's Aria here, founder of Mirror Health and Wellness, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who don't know me, I'm currently studying to be a certified health and life coach specializing in fertility and preconception care. If you got the opportunity to watch my last video, you would know that I've just hired myself a fertility coach to take me through a 12-week training program so that I can become pregnant in the next 90 days. So it's a very exciting time for me, and I'm hoping to conceive naturally. The 12-week program is a natural program, and I'm doing that really based around food and lifestyle, and there are no fertility drugs or anything unnatural about the process. So if you are really wanting to take a natural route to getting pregnant, then this is something that you might consider for yourself. And the reason why I'm doing this vlog is so that I can take you through what I'm learning and hopefully give you some tips and tricks along the way. So I've just been through week 3 and week 4 of the fertility coaching program. In week 3, I was continuing on with a 28-day reset cleanse, which I started the week prior. And the first 7 days was a bit more restrictive than the rest of the reset cleanse, in the fact that I was basically resetting my body and eliminating the hormones out of my body so I can start to reintroduce certain foods to find out how I react to those foods and whether or not there are any intolerances or anything there. So throughout the process, I've been, I'm pretty much gluten-free all of the time anyway, but I've definitely been gluten-free throughout the process. That's not something that I am going to reintroduce, but the foods that I eliminated that I will be reintroducing, or that I did reintroduce that I want to talk to you about today, was tomatoes, dairy and coffee. They were the main ones. Well, before starting this program, I definitely had a pretty healthy lifestyle, but I have found since being in the program that I wasn't as healthy as I thought I was. So in week 3, we started talking about reintroduction, and what my coach really wanted me to do was really focus on how certain foods were making me feel when I reintroduced them back into my diet. Of the foods that I had eliminated, I would choose one to reintroduce it for 2 days, have a break for 1 day, then reintroduce another food for 2 days, have a break, and then I could reintroduce the third one for 2 days. So which sort of took up about a week in length, and I really needed to be mindful of how I was feeling. So through when I reintroduced a food, was I feeling bloated? Was I feeling tired? What were my bowel movements like? What were my energy movements like? Did I have a runny nose? Did I have a headache? Any slight change at all that I notice, I really need to make note of that, because I think one thing that we don't often think about, when we generally feel pretty okay all the time, we don't sort of notice that even the smallest reactions to food can send big warning signs to our body and our reproductive system to stop all baby making processes and signal that it's not a great time to reproduce. So we want to know that our body is working in sync with the foods that we're eating and that we're not sort of having any adverse effects to them. Now, the first food that I introduced was tomatoes, and I love tomatoes. I like to put tomatoes on everything, and the reason why I eliminated it, or it was eliminated in the first week, was because it falls under the nightshade fruits and vegetables. And nightshades are actually known to cause inflammation in the body, so it was good to totally remove it from the diet, reset, and then reintroduce it. And to be honest, I didn't feel any different when I reintroduced tomatoes back into my diet. I think I felt pretty much the same. It was hard to notice. I mean, if I did feel anything different, it was hard to pick up on anything, and I was really trying to listen to my body and really trying to make sure that if there was anything there, I was taking note of it. I didn't really notice much with tomatoes, so I could, can safely reintroduce those back into my diet and be quite happy about that. One of the other foods that I reintroduced was dairy, in particular cheese. So cheese is a big thing for me. I don't eat a lot of dairy anyway, so I don't drink cow's milk. I don't think I would eat normal ice cream either. I definitely don't. I stick to coconut ice cream, or no ice cream, or sorbet. The other thing that I do love though is cheese. So I decided to reintroduce cheese into my diet after taking a break for about a week. And when I took that break for a week, I was actually feeling really, really good. So I noticed that I lost a little bit of bloat. So I lost a couple of kilos, about 2 kilos. And I feel like part of that was excess bloat. I might have mentioned in my last video. And it was funny though, because when I reintroduced cheese back into my diet, I noticed that immediately after eating my meal, I actually felt very heavy and bloated, and that made me feel a little bit tired. And it was interesting because I never before this experiment, I never actually would have thought that cheese would have caused any sort of adverse effect to my body. I'm not allergic to it. I may have a slight intolerance to it. I know that dairy doesn't generally agree with me, and maybe that's why I have a slight intolerance to it, but I've always been fine to eat cheese. Like, nothing's ever happened, so I always thought it was a safe food to eat. But it was just so interesting when I started eating cheese, my body was kind of saying no, like, hey, I don't like this, and I think that's a really good thing, because now it's up to me, it's my choice whether or not I want to eliminate cheese from my diet or continue eating cheese. And look, I may have mentioned this before, I'm not somebody who's terribly strict, but if cheese is going to hinder my chances of conceiving, and it's going to have a negative effect on my body, then it's something that I would definitely minimize. And over the past couple of weeks, I've definitely minimized cheese in my diet to the point of almost not having any. And it hasn't bothered me not one little bit. I mean, yeah, I like cheese. I think if I wanted to have some cheese, I would have some cheese. But I think the fact that I know that it's not agreeing with my body, and that could be something that's signaling those warning signals to maybe not reproduce, I'm fine to eliminate it, and my body's actually not craving it, which is fantastic. So that was one of the realizations that I had through the reintroduction phase of the 28-day reset cleanse. And yeah, I was actually really quite surprised, because to be honest with you, I thought, I'm going to reintroduce these foods, nothing's going to happen, I'm going to feel exactly the same, and that wasn't the case. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised, and now I feel a little bit more empowered to make the right choice for my body. The other thing that I reintroduced was coffee, and I'm going to talk to you about that. But before I do, I want to mention one of the other things that we spoke about in week 3, and that was getting more good quality fats into your diet. My fertility coach said that I should be getting at least 1 to 3 tablespoons of good quality fats into every meal. And that sounds like a lot. And even at first I was like, oh my God, like 1 to 3 tablespoons, like that's a lot of fat. Like, how am I going to make sure I'm eating that much fat? But it's actually not that much. It's, as easy as like, half an avocado or a quarter of an avocado, some, nuts and seeds, some grass-fed ghee, cooking or sauteing with good quality cooking oils like olive oil or coconut oil. I think one thing that we don't realize, and especially if we think back, now fats obviously is a lot more well received than it used to be. I mean, fats at one stage were a big no-no in a lot of people's diet, and they are a lot more well received these days, because I think people realize, or they actually are more knowledgeable, and they know that good quality fats are essential building blocks for mum and a growing fetus, and for the baby's brain as well. And the baby's brain develops in the very early stages of pregnancy, and hence why you want to make sure that you're getting a great intake of all of those healthy quality fats while you're trying to conceive, and in the very early stages of conception and first trimester as well. So one of the ways that I decided to incorporate additional good quality healthy fats into my diet was through the reintroduction of coffee. Now, I know caffeine's not great for women trying to conceive, because there's obviously a risk of consuming too much caffeine, which can lead to it can lead to miscarriage. I'm not going to say it will cause miscarriage, but it can lead to miscarriage. If you don't want to have caffeine, feel free to go for a decaf coffee. It doesn't have to be a caffeinated coffee. Decaf would be just fine. But when I reintroduced coffee back into my diet, I actually was adding a tablespoon of grass-fed ghee to the coffee. And it's actually called bulletproof coffee. I didn't know about this, and I just learnt this. And at first I thought, ew, that's not really going to taste very nice. But it's not that bad. A tablespoon of grass-fed ghee isn't a lot, and when it's mixed in with the coffee, it just gives it a bit of a creamy texture to it, and you almost don't notice it's in there. And after a few days of having coffee like that, I actually began to really, really like it. So that was just another way I could add more healthy fats into my diet, and I've done that through the reintroduction of coffee, and I've found that coffee actually doesn't have an adverse effect to me either, which is great. I probably want to limit my caffeine intake, especially if I conceive. I will definitely limit my caffeine intake. But at the moment, I have been drinking caffeinated coffee, and I will probably get some decaf coffee when I go out next time. I'm not too worried about that though. When I was pregnant with my son 5 years ago, I actually eliminated coffee from my diet when I found out I was pregnant anyway, and that was pretty easy to do, so I didn't miss it one little bit. Fiber was another thing that we spoke about in week 3, adding in more good quality proteins to the diet, so making sure that the good quality proteins, or the meats that I was eating, were all organic, grass-fed beef, free-range organic chickens, because it's really important to make sure that you're getting the best quality meat as possible. You know, meat's not all about eating like really large portions. The idea around eating meat should be around eating, you know, basically a proper portion size, which is about the size of the palm of your hand, and making sure that what you are eating is really good quality meat. So one of the other things that we spoke about in week 3 of the program was gut health, how that directly ties to messaging to the brain. So basically the largest nerve in the body is known as the vagus nerve, and that runs between the brain and the gut, and it sends messages from the gut to the brain, not the other way around. So in that order, messages from the gut to the brain. So you really want to make sure that your gut is as healthy as possible, so that it is sending the right messages to the brain. Because if your gut isn't happy and your gut isn't healthy, then it'll be sending signals to the brain that it's not okay and it's not a great time to start building a baby, which is not what we want. So really looking to make sure that we're staying on track with eating the right healthy, fresh fruits, vegetables, good quality meats, good quality fats. They're going to be agreeing with us, and then adding in things like fermented vegetables as well to really support that gut, and probiotics through food where possible. So, I mean, yes, it's great to take a probiotic supplement if you can't get probiotics through food, but the best way to consume a probiotics is through eating food. So the other thing that we spoke about in the 3rd week of the program was seed cycling. And that's something that I actually wasn't aware about before we spoke about it, which was unusual because I've been researching a lot about, you know, how to get pregnant naturally and tips and tricks to conceive and all sorts of things. And it's not something that came up for me, but seed cycling is where you actually consume certain seeds at different times of the month to promote fertility and being able to conceive naturally. So in week 3, I was actually in my luteal phase. And so in the luteal phase, which is the second half of your cycle, you should be eating sunflower and sesame seeds. They're the seeds that will help you conceive. And the easiest way I thought to consume those was in my morning smoothie, which I will do a video on very, very soon, because I've basically come up with the best smoothie for me. It's what I like to have in the mornings and what appeals to my taste buds, basically. So I was popping sunflower and sesame seeds in my smoothie. So in the first half of the cycle, you should be eating pumpkin seeds and flax seeds, and in the second half of the cycle, it's sunflower seeds and sesame seeds. And if you sort of follow that, it's called seed cycling, and that is supposed to help you conceive naturally and give you the best chances at conceiving naturally. Towards the end of week 3, actually, I started moving into my menstrual phase. So in week 3, it was going to be before I would speak to my fertility coach that I would start menstruation. So in week 3, we briefly touched on, if I started noticing any sort of PMS symptoms, that sort of foods such as like lemon, celery, and fennel. She said to me, look, if you start noticing any PMS, just try and incorporate some lemon, celery, and fennel into your diet, and that should help with those PMS symptoms. So that was a really good tip to have on hand. But funnily enough, I actually didn't feel like I had any PMS symptoms this month and this time around. And I don't know if it's just because I'd started this program and, I was really intentional on what I'd been eating and I was trying to do all the right things. But typically when I know I can get a little cranky just before I get my period, I actually wasn't getting any symptoms at all. And it felt like a much smoother and nicer process to go through. So that was a real positive and a big win for me. Last but not least, we spoke about just a little bit about mindful eating. So rather than sitting down and scoffing your food down, just sort of relax, take 10 minutes to eat, be really sort of intentional when you're eating, take a break. Rather than, what I would usually do during the day, eat at my desk, I actually took a break. I sat down at, away from my desk at a table. I think taking that time out can really give your body the chance to digest food properly. And when you're actually mindfully eating, you're able to sort of, I suppose, really sort of tell when you're full a bit quicker rather than just eating until you finished your meal. But if you actually reach your full point before the end of the meal, you're actually aware of it and you sort of go, oh, okay, well, I'm actually full and satisfied now. I don't really need to continue eating. So I think that's, one thing that I'll probably talk to you a little bit more later on down the track, but something that we'd spoken about is really honoring hunger and fullness and stopping when you are full, not when you are over full and, bloated and sort of like, oh, I can't eat anymore, I've just eaten way too much, but really stopping when you feel satisfied and full. So that was week 3 in a wrap. Week 4 was actually quite interesting because between week 3 and week 4, I actually had my period, but then week 4, I was actually in my follicular stage. So in week 4, we start the week as we always do. We started with what went well for the week and we debriefed on the previous week. We also spoke about, the sorts of things that we should be maybe thinking about in a follicular stage. And one of the things my fertility coach mentioned, she mentioned that it's a really good time of the month to try anything new. It's a really good time of the month for planning, for exercise and activity. So if I like doing sort of more high energy exercises, then this is probably the time of the month that I really want to do that and focus on it, because when I've got the most energy to put into those sorts of routines. So yeah, we spoke a little bit about that. And then we also spoke, this actually was really interesting to me and I thought that you might find it interesting too. We spoke about vitamin D, and I never knew that vitamin D is actually a hormone. Hello, vitamin D. Who would have thought that vitamin D is a hormone? But hey, it is. And vitamin D actually is responsible for keeping our thyroid healthy and putting out cellular energy. Sorry about that. And it basically keeps our mood happy and both our cardiac and immune systems supported correctly. So vitamin D is obviously very, very essential to conceiving and getting pregnant and staying pregnant because it has a very, very positive effect on our bodies. When I conceived at the end of last year, when I had a miscarriage, I actually found out very early on that I was deficient in vitamin D, so I started taking a vitamin D supplement right away. I guess I'll never know if that sort of had any effect or any impact, but it's been something that I've been very conscious of ever since. The other thing that we spoke about in week 4, there's a lot more talk obviously in week 4 about nutrition, which is something that we speak about every week because it's the basis of the foundation of this 12-week course. Talked about being gluten-free, pretty much gluten-free anyway. I would sometimes consume foods with gluten, but one of the things that I now know is that most foods that contain gluten are either highly processed or GMO foods, so genetically modified organisms. And these foods are usually lacking in high quality ingredients that we want to nourish our body and prepare for pregnancy. So the reason why we want to go gluten-free and eliminate them is because foods that, I mean, we really want to be consuming as many foods as we can that are going to nourish our body and give us the best chance at conceiving. And if we're conceiving a lot of foods that are high in gluten, then we're not really getting the quality nutrients that we need, and we're basically wasting the opportunity to give our body the fuel and the resources it needs to prepare and make a baby and, you know, have balanced hormones and all of the good stuff that we want. So that was really good to learn that, and I think that really cemented one of the reasons why I'm pretty much gluten-free anyway, and I've been off gluten ever since, and that's been a pretty easy process. But, you know, if anybody wants to know a little bit more about how to go gluten-free, what the benefits are, or you know, any tips, handy tips to maybe take that step to going gluten-free and staying gluten-free, then I'd be more than happy to do a video on it. So just leave a comment below. It's actually not as hard as you think, and there you can still eat so many great things, so I wouldn't worry about that. The other thing that was made mention that in the follicular stage is really good to eat really fresh foods, because that's really going to support your hormones. So eating a lot of, like, you know, like fresh foods like salads and salsas and fruits and things like that are really going to help support. I found that a little bit hard because I really like, I mean, I don't necessarily need to have a warm dinner at night, but I do like having a warm dinner. So what I tended to do throughout that week in my follicular phase, which I found worked really well for me, I made power bowls. So power bowls are a little bit like a poke bowl, but poke bowls are typically made with cold fish, and that's why I decided to call it a power bowl. Very, very similar idea though. So the basis of my power bowl, I'd have a good portion of baby spinach in there, and then I would have either some black rice, some quinoa, or some brown rice. And then I would have an assortment of different vegetables, and then a protein as well. And then I'd throw in some fermented veggies on top. I pretty much have sauerkraut with every meal. So yeah, so power bowls became a big thing for me in the follicular phase. I found them very, very easy to make, and very, very delicious as well. So it's kind of like a salad almost. Half of it's sort of cold and the other half is warm, and you sort of mix it all together, and it's just really, really yummy. So I found that a good way to combat going from having, like, you know, I suppose a curry or something like that, you know, really to get those sort of fresh foods, is trying to eat salads and things like that. So that's what I did. When we think about seed cycling, I mentioned that earlier on. So in week 4, because I was entering into my cycle and I'd just been through menstruation and I was in the follicular phase, I was eating flax seeds and pumpkin seeds. The other thing that we spoke about was incorporating belly massage into the follicular phase, because basically what we want to do is we want oxygen-rich blood pumping through the body, and we really want to stimulate the blood flow in the uterus. So you can probably YouTube belly massage and work out, find a couple of videos online about how to do it to yourself. It's not that hard. You can basically lay down on the lounge while you're watching TV and just sort of rub in circular motion just down around your ovaries and around your uterus to really get the blood flowing and stimulate the oxygen within the blood, because you really want to make sure that the blood is oxygenated, if that's even a word, or oxygen rich, which is what I think I first said. That makes a lot more sense. So you really want to make sure that your blood is very oxygen rich and is flowing and pumping through the body quite well. So what I've been doing as of late is I've actually just been laying down on the lounge for, you know, just 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a long period of time while I'm watching TV in the evening, and just massaging down around my uterus and around my fallopian tubes and that sort of general area. And that's been working really well for me, I think. I'm not too sure, but we'll see. Time will tell. So guys, that's a wrap of week 3 and week 4 of the fertility coaching program. That's what we spoke about in my training course, and that's what I've been going through over the last 2 weeks. It's basically food and nutrition based, and then it's a little bit of lifestyle as well. One thing that I've been doing a lot of, which I think is really, really important, I'm going to do a video on this later on, is basically just movement, because talking about oxygen-rich blood flow, but movement is a great way to get the blood pumping through the body and to promote oxygen-rich blood. So not every morning, but most mornings that I'm feeling like I've got enough energy, I like to try and get up a little bit earlier, about an hour earlier, and I just go for a walk. At least a 45 to an hour walk every second morning, and more if I can fit it into my schedule. But it's a really good way to get blood pumping and get that oxygen through your blood as well. So guys, until next week, or until next time, I must say, because these videos are bi-weekly. Until next time, stay well, and if you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you next time. See you later. Bye.